Afternoon test in Torah Ohr in the middle of the Biur, parshas Ve'era on V'haitzesi on the first of the four lashonos of Geula, of redemption, and V'hevesi, where Hashem says afterwards the fifth expression of redemption, where Hashem says, "I'll bring you to Eretz Yisrael." And the previous Maimah explains how these refer to the V'haitzesi is Torah שבכתב, the written Torah, and V'hevesi, I'll bring you to Eretz Yisrael, is the oral Torah. The written Torah calls out and beckons that Hashem's light can come out from being concealed into a revealed space, to be born, so to speak, that and the Av and Yer of Hashem should come out. And then V'hevesi, going to Eretz Yisrael, is where it's not just that that Hashem is revealed, but that we're the total oneness with Hashem, where Hashem's word comes through our mouth when we learn Torah. So we explained that to take us from a state of spiritual pregnancy to spiritual birth, birth is the end of a sort of in terms of the spheres, where you have a blockage and a constraint that you have that twice in the spheres. Once is after intellect, you have chachma, bina is wide, then das, it goes narrow again before getting wide again into chesed gvura, and then also it's narrow at the end, yesod to malchus at the end of the spheres. So what can bring it out from a state of pregnancy where it's concealed to birth? It's through the neck, and the neck represents the voice of Torah, which the Torah Shebechsav, the written Torah, is what beckons and calls out that our inner connection with Hashem, our inner love of Hashem, should be able to come out and be born. And the difference between the written Torah and the oral Torah is that the written Torah is from Chachma, which is the Abba, the father. Chachma only has the sort of the idea without the details, and it comes from the subconscious. That's Chachma. Then you have the oral Torah, which is more detailed and understood and explained. So that is Bina. That's the mother, which the understanding of Bina involves the development of the idea, the details of the idea, and putting everything in its right place. So with Torah Shebechsav, the written Torah, the main thing is the letters and the words. They should be written properly. And every letter hints on certain ideas of Chachma. And therefore, the exact letters are important. You can't add or subtract. And like it says, Dai l'chakima beramiza. It's enough for the wise, and the wise from Chachma beramiza with a hint. For example, if you look through the letters, every letter represents a certain spiritual energy. An aleph has a yud at the top, a yud at the bottom, and a line in the middle. So it hints. The yud is where you have just the main point without all the details. Yet the yud at the top is chachma la, chachma. The yud at the bottom is chachma tata, is intellect as it relates to coming down into action and practicality. And then the line in the middle is that downward flow of godly energy. And in terms of Hashem's names, Hashem's name Havaya starts with the yud, yud ke vav ke. Hashem's name Adnai ends with the yud. So the beginning of Chachma is Yud, the end of Malchus is also a Yud. And sometimes, instead of a Yud, we use a Daled to represent Malchus. Because Malchus, which is the recipient that takes in the spiritual energy of all the previous spheres, is called poor, and that's like Dalet. Dalet means the poor one. And then there's a line in the Yud, in the Aleph, which connects the two Yuds, the Yud at the top and the Yud at the bottom. And that is Tiferes, which is the middle sphere that connects Chachma at the top with the bottom Yud, Malchus, at the bottom. And so we've got, that's an Aleph. Then we have a base. A base also has 3 lines, and the middle line is also about is about bringing down, and so this shape of the base is also here. The Alter Rebbe explains less, but is also about the type of spiritual energy being brought down. Gimel also has a line. Many of the letters are made up of a vav with a yud in different ways, or two vavs, etc. So the gimel is a vav with a yud at the bottom. So that represents first bringing down the energy, and then once it's down, to have a yud at the end, a gift at the end, which is the idea of yesod, which is the mashpia and gives over to malchus. So gimel is related to yesod, the giver, and that's why we use the word gimel is from the word gomel, to give. And chesed is the feeling of wanting to give, whereas yesod is actually giving. So gomel dalim is to give to the poor, so gimel gives to dalit, and that's the meaning of the names gimel and dalit. And then we have a vav. So the vav also has a yud at the top, and then the yud is pulled down. So that's like a gimel, where it's a vav itself is really made up of a yud and a vav, a yud and then a line down, just like a gimel. But the difference is that with the vav, the yud is at the top, whereas with the gimel, the vav is at the bottom, because the act of giving, the real giving and bonding, comes from all the way at the top, very deep within, and therefore the vav has the yud right at the top, whereas the actual bonding and giving is right at the bottom after going through the full person. So in other words, the person has his full personality within, and then after his personality, it extends outwards to someone else. That there you have the yud at the bottom, but what powers giving and bonding, it comes from very deep within. It touches us very deep within relationships, and therefore that's the yud at the top, which a vav has. And whereas gimel, it's at the bottom. And the same thing with every letter and all the different crowns, they all hint to the style of the energy being given over. So chachma, which is all letters come from chachma, so that is the Torah Shebeksav, the written Torah, and therefore in the written Torah what matters is the letters, whereas in the oral Torah the meaning of the written Torah is only hinted, but it's not revealed. And all you have in the especially in stories, where we don't, in the stories in the Torah, then we don't know the real meaning. In other words, that what is the spiritual message of all these stories? It talks about Lavan, and it talks about Balak, and yes, we know that there's a simple story that Lavan goes here and Bilam gets on his donkey, but what's the deeper meaning of all of that? So that is concealed, and that is the levush of Torah. The stories are the garments around Torah. The Torah itself, in terms of the halacha, is even more concealed. And therefore Dovid said, "Galeinai, open my eyes, vabita, let me look, that I should understand the deeper meaning of Torah." And then, so we've got the meaning behind the story, the stories that's not quite easily understood. Then we have the soul of so that's the clothes of Torah, then the body of Torah. And then we have the soul of Torah, which is even deeper, and then the soul of the soul. Like, for example, all the kings of Esav, that certainly there were these kings with these names, but there's a lot of secrets in them. And that's why there's so many differences, that some of the kings, it says their cities, other kings, it doesn't say the city where they ruled from. And in the last of the kings of Esav, it mentions the king's wife's name as well. And why does it have all these discrepancies between the different kings? It's based on the Kabbalistic meaning, which is hinted deep within and not obvious. So what comes out is that the words of Torah Shebeksav, of the written Torah, are all hinting to the Chachma, but the Chachma is not revealed within them. And what is revealed is only the garment. even the body of Torah, which is the halachas, and certainly the soul of Torah, which is the sod and the Kabbalah, so that's very concealed, because Chachma is above revelation. Revelation only really happens in Bina. So now, so with Torah Shebechsav, so it comes from Chachma, the Torah Shebechsav comes from the Father, the source of the hashpah of giving over, which he just has the point, and therefore it's called Musar Avicha. The written Torah is called the rebuke of your father, whereas Torah Sheba'al Peh is called Torah Semecha, the Torah of your mother. This is like based on the pasuk Shema B'ni Musar Avicha V'al Titosh Torah Semecha. The Torah of the mother is Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is the mother has developed into actually having a child, and therefore Torah Shebechsav, that's where you have the kol, the voice, bringing out the fetus, that it should be revealed, or in the throat, connecting the mind and the heart through this voice. And Torah Sheba'al Peh is the source of the putting a combination of letters, putting them together so that they should have meaning. And in Torah Shebechsav, there's a very limited amount of words, whereas in Torah Sheba'al Peh, so it's more sort of developed, and you can have more and more words of explanation. Torah Sheba'al Peh keeps on extending. And this is all because it's from the side of the mother, that the father just gives one small hashpah, and then the mother develops it. And like we see that you have one pasuk that says B'sukkos teshva, you should rest in sukkahs, you should live in sukkahs during that in huts during the holiday of sukkahs. And then there's a whole Masechta Gemara, first Mishnayos, and then even more developed and at length Gemara, and then Rashi and Tosfos, etc., explaining it all more. And this is why Eretz Yisrael, which is called Eretz Tova or Chav, it's called the good and broad land. It's connected to Torah Sheba'al Peh because Torah Sheba'al Peh keeps on expanding outward. And Bina is the higher mother, and then Malchus is also the feminine, which is also about expansion and development. Now, this is why Eretz Yisrael is called Eretz Tzvi, the land of the deer. And the Gemara says that the idea of a deer is, one thing about a deer is that once you skin the deer, you can never put the skin back on. It will always be too small, and whereas when it's on, it works. So the meaning of this is that Torah Sheba'al Peh, it expands, but it fits. But you can always have more words, the words Mishnayos and Gemara, etc. But once it's taken off, you'll be able to fit that skin back on, because Torah Sheba'al Peh always extends. And the exact wording is not so important. That's why the Mishnah speaks using one type of language, and the Brisa another type of language, the Gemara another one. But Bina, although it's more in detail and it's lower, but its source is even higher than Chachma. Because in order to expand so much, you have to have a higher source than what Chachma has, which is limited. That's because Bina comes from the Kotzer Sheyud, the crown above the Yud, which is Keser, and the beyond energy, or in the Ein Sof, or in the person, the subconscious. Next paragraph, V'hine Kamei, the bottom of the first side of Nuntes. So now, Biana is called Torah Sheba'al Peh, and it's called this good and broad land. But Malchus, as we said, is also called the Eretz Tova or Chava, because both of them are from the feminine side and from the side of development and expansion. And like it says in Tikkun Zayar, in Pasach Eliyahu, it says that Malchus is Torah Sheba'al, is the Peh, the mouth. Torah Sheba'al Peh, Karin and it's called Torah Sheba'al Peh, because there's a pasuk that says Chachma is bachutz teruna that wisdom shouts in the streets, and it has chachma in plural. There's two types of chachma. There's chachma la, which is chachma Torah Shebechsav, and then there's chachma tata, the lower chachma, which is as it comes down into malchus, and that's Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah. And the Arizal explains that Malchus is different from all other spheres in the sense that Malchus can have the most drastic change. You can have Malchus right at the bottom of all the spheres, and it's just purely this little recipient. And sometimes Malchus expands until Nehis and Netzach Had Yesod. Sometimes it expands till Chagas, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes, and sometimes it elevates all the way to be equal to the other spheres. In other words, going all the way to the top of the spheres. So what does this mean, and what's going on? That Malchus, because Malchus is a recipient, so Malchus either it's just in the state of receiving, and it's right at the bottom, it's right below. But the act of receiving is also something with its own power and its own value, and therefore it can be expanded till we realize that either it's equal to the spheres or it's even above the spheres. Also, because Malchus is a recipient by nature, so every time it's different depending on what it receives and how it receives, whereas all the other spheres, they have a specific style, and therefore they're more sort of set. And so anyway, so Malchus is can always expand, and the keli, the vessel container of Malchus, also expands according to the the light and energy which is shone into it. And that's the idea of Malchus being compared to the tzvi, the deer. In Eretz Yisrael is called Eretz Tzvi, which can mean the land of the deer, because the skin expands according to the size of the flesh. So with even though with other spheres as well, you have certain changes. For example, on Shabbos and Yom Tov, there's more revelation than on other days, but the kalim still stay the same. There can just be sometimes more light and energy than other times, but still the containers stay the same, and they still remain the same basic spheres. Whereas with Malchus, there can be this big change, because it's like we said, it doesn't have set limits, and that's like Torah Sheba'al Peh that can get bigger based on every time a new person teaches Torah, so he adds to Torah. Now with Torah Shebechsav brings with it the birth and simcha, happiness, and nugim, like it said in the previous mimer, this love with bliss. Whereas Torah Sheba'al Peh is the hard work. It's just bittul. What does Hashem want? Just trying to work out Hashem's will, and let it sort of come through you without getting colored on the way. So that is the idea of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the bittul rather than the spiritual dazzling of Torah Shebechsav. Next paragraph, Ata. So now there's another advantage in Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is connected to another meaning in the word tzvi. That tzvi can also mean rotzen, one's will or desire. Like in Aramaic, you have words with tzvisun that meaning to want, and in Hebrew as well, there's hints of this. So what does it mean? That Torah Sheba'al Peh is Hashem's actual will. When in Torah Shebechsav, we can't see Hashem's will clearly. It says holy words of Hashem, but what does Hashem actually want us to do? Not so clear. So Torah Sheba'al Peh is where it's actually clear, and does Hashem want the halacha to be chayev or potter, kosher, or unfit, unsuitable? So that is in Torah Sheba'al Peh, and therefore it has more of Hashem's ratzon. Torah Sheba'al Peh is more connected to Hashem's ratzon, Hashem's desire and will, than Torah Shebechsav, the written Torah. And although Torah Sheba'al Peh is lower, it's Malchus, but we know that the bottom connects to the top. Not that the bottom is wedged into the top. And therefore, Malchus specifically connects to Hashem's ratzon, Hashem's will. that in order to plant, so planting is power to grow, which is also power which goes on forever. Things can grow forever. One tree leads to another tree to another one. And that is also in the ground, which is the lowest level, is connected to the highest level. Okay, and this is only in halacha, whereas in Agada, it doesn't tell us what Hashem's desire is, and therefore it's only connected to Chachma, whereas halacha, which tells you what to do, it's not just wisdom, but telling us Hashem's desire, so that is Ratzon and Keser. Now, next paragraph. Although there are advantages in Torah Sheba'al Peh over Torah Shebechsav, because that's where we have Hashem's will revealed. But on the other hand, it deals with the lower things. The Torah Sheba'al Peh is dealing with practical questions, agriculture, business, disputes, lies, etc. But so although it's lower, it's like the pasuk says regarding Vehevesi, it says that Hashem will take us to Eretz Yisrael. I'll take them to the land which I raised my hands to give, so to give it, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Asati es lachem, I'll give it to you, my Rasha, as an inheritance, a heritage, Ani Hashem, I am Hashem. So what's this idea of Hashem, Asasi Yadi, the land for which I raised my hand? What it means is that although the hand is lower than the head, you can lift the hand above the head. And similarly with Malchus and Torah Sheba'al Peh, that you can lift it beyond Chachma and beyond Torah Shebechsav, which is the idea also of Eshes Chayal Teres Baila, that a woman of El is the crown of her husband, that she rises, Malchus rising beyond her husband, beyond the Midas, beyond Zah. And this is also the meaning of Mikdash Adnai Kone Yodecha, the sanctuary of Hashem. Will be your hands will establish. So again, it's about the hands that rise above to even deeper place than what we would get through Chachma. Next paragraph. V'zehu. So now the pasuk says, "Vayisa teres tiferes utznif melucha b'chafel." So this pasuk is in Yeshaya, and it says that near the beginning of Perek Samach Beis. Pasuk Gimel, it says that you shall be a crown of glory in the hands of Hashem and a kingly diadem in the hands of your God. So what is the meaning of this? Talking about how us being Hashem's crown. So the idea is that we're talking about Malchus, and Malchus, although it's the lowest, but it's a crown that rises beyond the head, beyond the brain, beyond Chachma. And this is, it says, in the hand of your God. Why? Because the hand is lower, but you can raise it above the head. So this is what it means that Hashem says, I'll bring you to the land that I've promised to give it to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, because the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov represents love, reverence, and compassion. And the land which they are given is greater than their midas. So they represent the midas, Chesed, Gemara, and Tiferes, but then the land, which is Malchus, it rises beyond them. And it's given as a Meirasha, given as a heritage. So it has a deep light of Hashem inside, but it's concealed because it's in a state of complete bittul, complete self-nullification. And that itself is its advantage over the other spheres, because when we have love or reverence, any emotion that we've brought ourselves to through our reflection and meditation, so then that's an expansion of self. Whereas bittul, this state of total self-nullification, just trying to understand what Hashem wants, so that is higher because there's no sense of self. It's all Hashem. It's like the Malach teaching the Beis Yosef Torah, and then he had the Torah. Then he hears his voice. I am the Mishnah that's speaking in your mouth, meaning that he just let Hashem's word and Hashem's Torah come right through him without him changing the words, impacting on it at all. So with this, we understand the idea. We said that this mimer will help us understand about yichud of Abba, Ema, and Zun, of the unification of the intellect and emotions. So what we've explained is that the intellect and emotions sometimes have a blockage in the neck, where it's through the voice, which is also in the neck, the voice of Torah, that beckons the intellect to come into the emotions and brings them together. So that there we have Torah Shebechsav, which sort of brings the fetus, so to speak, to be born. And together with birth, there is a pain of labor and birth, and that relates spiritually to the pain of not being able to have a revelation, where the light is still stuck within, and therefore that itself is the pain that it hasn't been born yet. With the fetus representing this new light coming in, and so therefore the birth comes with a lot of joy. And now, when at the time of birth, then all din and all klippa is thrown out, and that's the idea of the blood that comes together with birth. But while the fetus is still within the mother and she's still pregnant, so then that's still a state of concealment, and then there's still possibility of things going wrong, spirits in spiritual terms of klippa taking energy from it. But then the birth is about revelation, and then all klippa is sent away, and this is the idea of Torah שבעל, which we said reaches beyond Chachma, reaches to Keser, to the Ein Sof, the Hashem's unlimited light, or in terms of us, like the subconscious. And every day there's this new intellect, and similarly every day we can rise beyond that to Hashem's desire, Hashem's will. Like the pasuk says, Chadashim Lebekarim, which we could translate to mean that there's Chadash, there's something new, Lebekarim, every morning. That every morning we become a new creation, and every morning we have to again leave Egypt, we have to again spiritually give birth. And that happens through the throat, which is Torah Shebechsav. But once we have spiritually given birth, don't leave it there, but instead go to the next step, go to Eretz Yisrael, which is Torah Sheba'al, and letting Hashem just flow and shine through us. This concludes the Maimer and parshas Va'era, and with this understanding of how Chachma is the sort of ideas in short, and a bit about all the different letters coming from Chachma, and how Chachma, and we this Chachma and Torah Shebechsav is what allows for birth and relates to the midas of the Avos, of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, love, reverence, and compassion. But then a level even beyond that, which is Malchus, Eretz Yisrael, Torah Sheba'al, the land of the deer, or Tzvi, besides meaning deer, means Ratzin, the land of the desire, Hashem's desire, and that is a high level still, and that is where Hashem raises his hand. Although it's only a hand, it goes above the head, that when we're learning and trying to work out Hashem's Torah, and especially halacha, then we connect Hashem in the deepest way possible, and Hashem just speaks through us.